Bismillah, hello everyone. This is Muhammad, and this is the first of our mini series about subject verb agreement within our advanced English grammar course. Now, we start with subject verb agreement because it's one of the most important and defining characteristics of English proficiency. When you start talking to anyone, the first thing they notice about your grammar is how you put your subjects into your verbs, how you make and compose your sentences using singular subjects with singular verbs, plural subjects with plural verbs. Now we're going to start with something very basic. It's just a review. Okay, so just to review, we know that if a sentence has a singular subject, it is followed by a singular verb, and if it has a plural subject, it is followed by a plural verb. Examples: Alex loves football, pupils love football. So Alex singular loves for the singular, which is Alex, and football is the object. Um, Same here, pupils love football, love for pupils, which is a plural. Now, that might seem so easy, but actually, there are other complex cases where you're baffled and you keep wrapping your head, and sometimes you can't really figure out if I should use a singular verb or a plural verb, but this one ends with S, it must be a plural. What should I do? Well, we're gonna make all of this easy today for you. Let's continue. Okay, so what are we gonna learn about today? Complex subjects, clauses as subjects, what clause as a subject, singular nouns referring to groups, names and titles ending in S referring to a single unit. These all pose a problem for ESL students and some people whom English is not their first language. And we're going to try to tackle that today and simplify it and make it easy for you. Let's continue. Okay, complex subjects. All right, so when you hear the word subject, sometimes you think, okay, that must be one word. But sometimes a subject is more than one word. It's a full sentence, it's a whole phrase. When the subject of a sentence is complex, the verb must agree with the main noun and the subject. Okay, so many leading numbers of the opposition party. This is all the subject. Let's use this one to make it, to clarify. This is all the subject. All of that is the subject. Okay, have is the verb. Criticized the delay. All right, but here, what can we do? Well, someone might think, okay, I'm going to choose the opposition party and say has. But this is wrong because the main noun and the subject is members, right? So members has to agree with have. Many leading members of the opposition party have criticized the delay. The only excuse that he gave for his actions, all of this is the subject. Now, someone might think, okay, well, actions. Okay, I'm gonna say were. No, you shouldn't say were. You shouldn't use were because we're talking here about the main noun, which is excuse. So the only excuse that he gave for his actions was that he was tired. Okay, let's continue. Now, sometimes the subject comes after the verb. Okay, that sounds strange, but as far as I know and as far as I learned, that the order is subject, verb, object. Okay, well, not in all cases. In that case, when the subject comes after the verb must also agree with the subject when the subject follows the verb. Okay, displayed on the board were the exam results. Where's the subject here? The exam results is the subject. The exam results. Okay, this, the exam results, has to agree with were. Okay, so that's why we said the exam results. We can't say displayed on the board. Okay, someone might think, okay, the board. Okay, board, then was. No, displayed on the board. Were what? The exam results. All right. The exam results were displayed on the board. This is another way of saying the sentence. So sometimes when you're baffled, when you don't know what to choose, try to reconstruct, rephrase the sentence. It'll lead you to the correct conclusion. Okay, let's continue. Clauses as subjects. Sometimes, as I said, we're still talking about the complexity of the subject. Sometimes a clause can be a subject. Now, if the subject is a clause, we usually use a singular verb. Okay, to keep these young people in prison, this is all the subject is inhumane. Oh my God, this is unbelievable. Okay, to keep these young people in prison, this is all the subject is inhumane. Now, why are we using is and not are? We're talking about people being in prison. Okay, that's like a group of people. That's like more than one. No, but we're talking about here the idea of doing something, the behavior, the practice. Okay? To keep these young people in prison is inhumane. Think about it as being a judgment or giving a statement. Okay, to ignore these warnings is irresponsible. Now someone might say warnings, no. Okay, are no, you have to be careful because we're talking about the act of ignoring these warnings. This is irresponsible. Whoever took them remains a mystery. Yeah, this is the mystery. So we're talking about a mystery. So we don't know whoever took them. Whoever took them. We're not talking about whoever as a like a person per se, but we're talking about this mystery that nobody knows whoever took them. And that's why we used a singular verb here. Okay, let's continue. What clause as a subject? Now, what clause can be complicated sometimes. If we use a what clause as the subject, we use a singular verb if the following main noun is singular. And we use either a singular or a plural verb if the following main noun is plural. Now, sometimes a plural verb is preferred in more formal contexts. Let me explain that because that might all sound gibberish to you, but let me explain it. What worries us is the poor selection process. Okay? Now, what worries us, okay, that's okay. We know that what worries us is the verb. But what about the noun that follows? The poor selection process. We have to determine what kind of verb we use here based on what follows. What worries us? Now, this is all with what clauses. What worries us is the poor selection process. What is needed are additional resources. You see, so additional resources, you've got additional resources here, and you've got are because we're talking about additional resources. What is needed are additional resources. Now, we might also say what is needed is additional resources, but this is colloquial, meaning it's informal, that you shouldn't use it in academic writing or in formal conversations, for example, with your boss, in a formal meeting, or in any other setting. All right, let's continue. Okay. Singular nouns referring to groups. Yeah, some nouns with the singular form that refer to groups can be used with either a singular or plural verb. Okay, that's great. These nouns are sometimes called collective nouns. An example, the council has postponed a decision on the new road. I can also say the council have postponed a decision on the new road. All right, but well, that's not all. Wait for it. How to decide? Sometimes it's difficult to decide. Now we have to think about the focus. What are we focusing on here? Are we focusing on the institution or organization as a whole unit? Well, in that case, we use singular. Are we focusing on the individuals within the group? In that case, we use plural. Now, examples include army, association, audience, etc., etc. In addition to some well-known organizations, specific organizations, the Bank of England, the BBC, IBM, the United Nations, etc., etc., etc. Okay? We have to think about the focus. Are we focusing on the institution or on the individuals? Okay? Now, in general and often, you can use either one with very little difference in meaning. However, in formal contexts, such as academic writing, it is more common to use a singular verb. We're not done yet because in some contexts, we must use either a singular or a plural form of the verb, depending on the meaning. All right, here, these are some examples. The committee usually raise their hands to vote. Yes, not the committee usually raises its hands, sorry. Why? Because this refers to the individual members, not the committee as a whole. So we're referring to the committee members all raising their hands to vote yes or no. We can't say the committee usually raises because we're talking about the members of the committee, the individuals of the committee. The school is to close next year. The school will be closed next year. Basically, that's what it means. Now we can say the school are to close. Why? Because this refers to the institution or building, not to the individual in the school. The individual, the students, the individuals, the students, the teachers, they're not going to close. They're going to go on vacation or have some good time with their friends and family members and whatnot. That's why we have to use is and not are. All right? Thank you. Now, there are some names and titles ending in S referring to a single unit. When names and titles that end in S refer to a single entity, we use a singular verb. This includes names of countries, newspapers, titles of books or films, and quoted plural words or phrases. Let's have some examples. At this time of the year, or of year, the Netherlands is 1 hour ahead of the UK. You see, the Netherlands, okay, you might think, okay, Netherlands, that's a plural. No, it's just one country. That's why we say is. The Machine Gunners was one of Robert Wistle's most successful books. We're talking about one book. We're not talking about gunners being people going around killing one another. No, we're talking about the name of that book. That's why we say was. Daps is the term used in the southwest of the country for sports shoes. Now we're talking about the term. We're not talking about the shoes. We're not talking about the term. That's why we're using singular here. Now, I enjoyed this very, very much. Thank you so much for tuning in. And we're going to continue with more classes. Please subscribe to the channel, share, and if you have any questions about what we learned about today, please leave them in the comments. Thank you so much for listening and have a great one.